Today, I have Ateez's spin-off from the Witness album, and I'm going to teach you how to turn it into a 6-ring A5 photocard binder. This is the type of project that can seem really intimidating at first, and when I was teaching myself how to do it, I made a lot of mistakes. But I've actually made quite a few of these now. I'm going to share with you my tips and tricks that make it a little bit easier and that really make a difference in the quality of the finished product. I'm very particular about quality because I sell mine. But even if you're making it for yourself, you deserve to have something nice. So let's make a project you'll enjoy using for a long time. I always start by removing the covers of the photo book. I have seen other people do binder conversions and use fabric or cardstock to line the inside of the binder. This can be a really beautiful option, but using the photo book covers has a couple of advantages. The first is that it uses up another element of the album that might be difficult to recycle elsewhere. Since I focus on recycling albums cover to cover, this is a huge bonus for me. The rest of the photo book will get used later, don't worry. The other advantage to using the photo book cover to line the inside of the binder is that it saves a little bit of time and money to use what you have on hand instead of hunting down new materials. But you'll have to decide what's right for you. The only thing I can tell you for sure is that not lining the binder is really not an option. You'll see why soon. If you're concerned about cutting apart the photo book cover neatly, you could use a paper cutter if you have one suited for heavy paper. The photo book cover is not especially thick. Personally, I find it easy enough to cut with scissors, following the folds of the spine. If I don't quite get it right, it's easy enough to trim a little more. The size of these panels does not need to be precise. This next step does take a little bit of brute strength, and sometimes, as I found this time, a little bit of luck. We have to remove the box that held the photo book and inclusions. Luckily, this box is constructed separately from the cover of the album and then glued in place. This means that I do not have to do any cutting. The two pieces can simply be pulled apart. Sometimes this happens easily. When it's giving me trouble like this, though, I don't give up quickly. The trick to this step, if there is one, is to try all the different corners of the box. There's usually one corner that will give a little more easily than the rest. As you can see, you may also have to move the box around to see where you can get better leverage. In a way, I'm thankful that this album is one of the toughest I've had to pull apart. That way I can assure you that yours is likely to be easier, and if it isn't, it's not because you're doing something wrong. If your surface is this rough, clean it up a little before the next step. It's now time to deal with the album sleeve. The texture of this piece often gets scuffed or collects dirt, so I'll usually try to tidy it a bit before I take it apart. On the bottom, I gently peel it apart where it was glued. At the top of the sleeve, I'll need to cut it in half. I'm always careful to do this as evenly as possible. I like to use the sleeve on both the front and back covers of my binders. If you would prefer to use yours only on the front, then I would recommend leaving more length to help you attach it to the front cover. I like to use two kinds of glue when making binders. This glue tape provides a fast hold. It helps me move on to the next step of the project quickly. But I also use white glue for a more long-lasting hold. My glue tape says permanent, but with less porous materials like cardboard or plastic, I do find that it peels up over time. The white glue may take longer to dry, but once it does, I'm confident that it's not going anywhere. This step is where that glue tape really shines, because if I had used white glue only, I would probably have to either put a weight on top of these or sit there and hold it until the white glue developed a little more hold. Instead, it's already holding firm. I also use both types of glue when securing the front cover. I have experimented with a lot of different ways to apply the glue tape, but I have not found any particular pattern to be an advantage yet. A simple X is easy, and the corners are usually challenging to get with white glue. It is important not to overlap the glue tape and the white glue if you can help it. The white glue will stop the glue tape from sticking. I'm always quite thorough with the white glue. This cover is not particularly porous, so it is not going to create a bond by soaking into the paper. The good news is this also means there's not a high risk of the cover warping thanks to the moisture of the glue. It does occasionally leak out the edges though, so I usually go a little bit lighter there. Now, the edges from applying the sleeve are all hidden. Another thing that I love about using the photo book covers is that people often don't even notice them until I point them out. In some cases, this would be a bad thing. But in this case, I think they look like they belong there. The back cover can be a little more challenging. You'll often have less paper at the top and bottom of the sleeve, and I always double check that I have it facing the right direction before I apply it. Thankfully, I have not yet put one of these on upside down, but better safe than sorry. As you can see, I check to make sure that the front and back sleeves are lined up before I glue it down. Sometimes, even with my glue tape trick, the pieces just don't adhere on the first try. I find this is especially common with the back cover because I have less paper to work with in the first place. So it just pulls away a little bit harder. A little extra pressure usually takes care of it. The glue tape placement doesn't matter much to me on the front cover, but on the back I find that placing it between the glue from the box can make a big difference. It just does not adhere well to those spots where the box was pulled up. The surface is not as smooth. I'm still applying it to the corners, because, once again, those can be a little bit tricky to secure with the white glue. This is where you can really see the importance of lining your binder. Whether you use the photo book covers like I do, or you choose to use a different decorative material, the binder just seems transformed once you cover up all of those ripped pieces in the back. It's also going to help that decorative sleeve stay in place. Now, it has to dry overnight. Once it's dry, it's time to install the binder mechanism. This is the part that I found really intimidating until I actually did it. The binder mechanism comes with the hardware you need. The one I use is linked in the video description. One of the most important tips I have for making this album into a binder is not to center your mechanism vertically. The mechanism is slightly longer than the album is tall. Sticking out a little bit at the top really doesn't hurt anything, but sticking out at the bottom can prevent this binder from sitting flat on the shelf, so it's more functional this way. Once I have it where I like it, I use a mechanical pencil with the lead extended to mark where the holes should go. It may seem a little unsophisticated, but I haven't found another marking tool that's more accurate. And if I make a mistake, I can erase these lines. When I made my first few binder conversions, I thought that the holes that I made for the hardware needed to be round, because the hardware is. But I make these holes with an X-Acto knife, not any specialty tools. So my attempts to make round holes were often frustrating and messy. I have since found that square holes work just fine. This has allowed me to keep using my X-Acto knife instead of searching for a specialty tool. I want album recycling to be accessible to many people with many levels of skill and budget. I don't see the point of sending someone out to buy a tool they'll use one time. If a project can be done with a tool that you may already have on hand, then that's probably what you should use. I do often go back and forth when cutting through the spine of the binder. This type of cardboard tends to peel out of the hole in layers. So while I may think that I have the hole cleared from one side, some stubborn layers may remain stuck. And they're often easier to access from the other side, no matter where I started. But there is an advantage to this cardboard peeling up in layers that I'll show you soon. However, if you're getting a lot of dust and shreds of cardboard like I am here, it's a sign that your blade is getting dull. It is tearing through the cardboard instead of cutting it. Don't worry, I made sure to change my blade after I finished this hole. It is very important to test the fit of your hardware as you go. It is very frustrating to think you're ready to put your mechanism in, only to find that you have to go back and do more cutting. As you can see, this one fits. It won't be secure until the end, so I remove it while I make the second hole. Now it's time for another very important binder making tip. You see this part of the mechanism that sticks up? If I installed the mechanism now, that would hold the body of the mechanism slightly up from the spine. It doesn't really impair the function of the binder. The rings do still work, but it looks a little bit awkward for the metal to stand out from the cardboard. And this album is barely A5 sized. So every little bit of space counts when trying to get those pages inside. Do you remember that I told you there was an advantage to the cardboard coming up in layers? This is where it really shines. I'm cutting a square around the hole that I made for the hardware, but I'm not trying to cut all the way through the spine. I am carefully peeling away the cardboard 1 or 2 layers at a time, creating an indentation for that part of the mechanism to nestle into. It's important for you to know that I cannot tell you how many layers to peel away. The layers do vary in thickness. This is part of the nature of the material. So even with all of my experience, I simply have to go slow, be careful, and pay attention. The one thing that has come from my experience is the ability to judge by eye when I think I've gone deep enough. When I started, I was testing the fit of the mechanism pretty much every layer. Much like the hardware though, I do still test the fit before I call myself done. The two things I'm looking for is that the grommet actually fits inside the hole I made, and that the length of the mechanism sits flat. The first one is usually the hardest, because then I just have to make the second one to match. As you can see, this part of the project is not exactly pretty, but if you've done it correctly, it will be completely covered by the binder mechanism. If you haven't done it correctly, and you can see a little bit of cardboard around the corners, that's okay. We all make mistakes. You could try coloring it with black marker if it bothers you, or gluing on some more black paper. Now it's time to install the mechanism. This is probably the easiest part of the whole process. The mechanism comes with rivets. The flat-headed side goes on the outside, and the other side simply screws in. Most of the binder mechanisms I have used come with flathead screws, but a couple did use Phillips head. Just make sure that you check before you work so that you have the correct tools on hand. One small screwdriver is probably all you need for this project. So don't be intimidated by me pulling out this set of 6. I have owned these for a long time. And once again, I'm all about using the tools you already have. But if you don't own a screwdriver already, a small set in a box like this one has served me very well through the years. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky to get these stubby screws started. But the good news is that once they're in, they really stay there. I have yet to have any wiggle and jiggle their way out. And there you have it, folks. Look how the binder sits flat on a surface. It won't damage your shelves or warp pages. The mechanism sits flush against the cardboard of the spine. Would you have guessed that I assembled this binder with only a few simple tools? I hope I've convinced you of just how easy and approachable this project can actually be. Let me know if you try it.